Dividing decimal numbers using long division can be challenging. Let's do some examples together to clear any doubts. Question 1 reads, divide 2.35 by 5.1 and round to 3 decimal places. Before we get started, remember that this number is your divisor and that number is your dividend. In other words, the first number that appears in the statement is your dividend and the second number is your divisor. When we apply long division, the divisor goes in this area and the dividend goes here. The answer that you find is called the quotient. So our divisor is 5.1 and our dividend, which will go inside here, is 2.35. Now when it comes to long division, we want to avoid having a divisor that is a decimal number. Notice that 5.1 is a decimal number. So what we can do is modify 5.1 so that we shift this decimal point once to the right. This move makes 5.1 into a whole number. If you do this to the divisor, you must also do it to the dividend, so we'll bring this decimal point once to the right as well, giving us a new question where the divisor is 51 and the dividend is 23.5. This is technically no different from multiplying both values by a factor of 10, resulting in an equivalent statement. Now we're ready to apply long division. You ask yourself, how many times does 51 fit into 2? It doesn't. 2 is too small. So we take into account both of these digits and ask the question again. How many times does 51 fit into 23? Again, it doesn't. 23 is too small. It needs to be at least 51. And because those two digits don't work, we have to take into account all three digits. And since there's a decimal point here, we should also include a decimal point in the quotient. 51 fits into 235 how many times? You may have to guess and check here, but I know it happens to be 4, so we place a 4 in that position. 4 times 1 makes 4. 4 times 5 makes 20. And so we subtract these numbers. 5 take away 4 is 1, 3 take away 0 is 3, and 2 take away 2 is 0. As you can see, we end up with a remainder of 31. We don't want any remainders in this problem. So we introduce a 0 to the right of 5. We bring that 0 down, and we ask ourselves, how many times does 51 fit into 310? It happens to be a maximum of 6 times. So 6 times 1 makes 6. 6 times 5 makes 30. And if we subtract these two numbers out, we end up with a 4. Notice that we have a remainder of 4, but we want to continue. We want to round to 3 decimal places, so we need at least 4 digits in the quotient following the decimal point before we can start rounding. We'll introduce another 0. We bring that 0 down, and notice that 51 doesn't fit into 40. We'll write down a 0 here. 0 times 51 makes 0. We subtract these numbers and we end up with 40. We introduce another 0 where we have our dividend. And that goes down. And 51 fits into 400 a maximum of 7 times. So we'll put that here. 7 times 1 makes 7. And 7 times 5 makes 35. If we subtract, we end up with 43. At this point, we will stop because we've already gathered 4 digits following the decimal point. And we want this rounded to 3 decimal places, and we have enough digits to determine what our answer will be. Our answer will be 0.461. Notice that this 0 is followed by a 7. 7 is 5 or more, therefore we round the 0 to a 1. Let's do the next example. Divide 73.23 by 8 using long division until the decimal terminates. Just as before, we know that this will be our dividend, and that number will be our divisor. Let's place them in the right position. We have 8 in that position and 73.23 inside there. How many times does 8 fit into 7? It doesn't. So we take into account both digits. 8 fits into 73 9 times, or a maximum of 9 times. And don't forget that it's followed by a decimal point. 9 times 8 is 72. If we subtract those two values, we end up with 1. We bring down the 2. 8 fits into 12 once. 1 times 8 makes 8, leaving us with a remainder of 4. We bring down the 3. 8 fits into 43 5 times. 5 times 8 makes 40. And when we subtract these, we end up with a remainder of 3. We need to continue doing this until we end up with a remainder of 0. Since we've run out of numbers, over here, we can now introduce a 0, just like how we did before. We bring that down. 8 fits into 30 3 times. And that amounts to 24 once we multiply 8 and 3. We subtract these two values and we end up with 6. Let's keep going. We have a remainder of 6, so we introduce another 0. 8 fits into 60 7 times. 7 times 8 is 56. And again, we end up with a remainder of 4. But as you can see, if we bring down another 0, and 8 fits into 40 5 times. Exactly, leading us, once we multiply 8 and 5 together, an output of 0 as our remainder. And so our answer for this question is 9.15375. Let's do one more example. This time the question reads, divide 35 by 15 and round to 2 decimal places. That's our divisor, and 35 is our dividend. 15 does not fit into 3, so we take into account both digits. 15 fits into 35 2 times. 2 times 15 is 30, and we subtract, we end up with a remainder of 5. Well, we want 2 decimal places, so we'll introduce a decimal point and a 0, which we'll bring down. 15 fits into 50 3 times. Notice that I introduced the decimal point in the quotient. 3 times 15 is 45. And that amounts to another remainder of 5. Seems like we'll have a repeating decimal here. We'll introduce another 0. And we can repeat. 15 fits into 50 3 times. 3 times 15 is 45. And again, a remainder of 5. This shouldn't be a surprise. And what we should end up with, if we continue this, is a quotient with an endless number of 3's. To round this to 2 decimal places, we simply end up with an answer of 2.33. I hope now, after watching this video, you realize how important a calculator is. Thank you all for watching.